The importance of the rule of law is hard to overstate. It defines those societies not governed by the whims of central authorities. Tom Palmer, Cato Institute Senior Fellow and General Director of the Atlas Global Initiative for Free Trade, Peace, and Prosperity, believes that promoting liberty and the rule of law means discovering that tradition in cultures around the world. He explores these themes in his new book, Realizing Freedom, Libertarian Theory, History, and Practice. He spoke at the Cato Institute December 1st, 2009. This is a portion of his speech.
Anytime someone talks about the rule of law, most people feel their eyes turning back in their foreheads. It just seems dull and uninspiring or stale. Quite a few years ago, I watched a German film by an avant-garde leftist, and they mocked the rule of law. They showed a very, very old man stammering, some difficulty getting out his words. He said that the Rechtsstaat, the law-governed state, was a great accomplishment. And the point was to mock him. How boring and stupid to favor something like that. But it struck me that that elderly man back in the 1970s had lived through a horror, a lawless regime, National Socialism. He knew how important the rule of law is. And in fact, the rule of law should be inspiring to us. It is a serious goal, and without it, there is no freedom and there are no rights. Its centrality has been made all the more evident to me by the work that I do in post-totalitarian and some still semi-totalitarian societies, in which the central issue is the development of the legal institutions of liberty, the rule of law. Without the rule of law, one is at the mercy of the arbitrary will of other people, and that is to exist in a condition of unfreedom. Milton Friedman, to his great credit, corrected himself many years later about his comments on the Soviet Union. He said in 1989 or 1990, there are three things you have to do: privatize, privatize, privatize. And years later, he recognized, he said that was naive. You can't privatize into something that doesn't have a legal framework of property rights, of contract, of the rule of law. Those are, as our colleague Bill Niskanen discusses them, the soft infrastructure of the free society, and they should be the focus of our attention. John Locke put it, as he did so often, very clearly, when he discussed the relationship between law and freedom. So many people complain there's too many laws, we're being harassed by laws, and we understand what they mean. But in a sense, those are not laws, they're commands or edicts or interferences. As he pointed out, the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For in all the states have created beings capable of laws, where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which there cannot be where there is no law. Freedom is not, as we are told, a liberty for every man to do what he lists or whatever he is inclined to do. That was the view of the other side. But it is a liberty to dispose in order as he lists his person, actions, possessions, and his whole property within the allowance of those laws under which he is, and therein not to be subject to the arbitrary will of another, but freely follow his own. Those who have the power to arbitrarily reassign, eradicate, or create rights in order to achieve their ideas of fairness or efficiency or community, put all the rest of us at their mercy and eradicate our freedom. It's a theme that I deal with on a number of occasions in my book when I criticize those who advocate so-called welfare rights or positive rights as entitlements from the state. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. It was a great accomplishment of the tradition of classical rights thinking, and one of the great figures here is Thomas Aquinas and the later scholastic thinkers, whom I also discuss in the book, to connect what is called in the legal literature subjective right, the idea that you have a right to do something or to be paid $10 for something that you sold, your right, and objective right, when we say this is the right thing to do, or this is the right ordering of the world, or justice. And in particular, the way in which justice is achieved is by respecting the rights of all the members of society. It's a justice-generating machine, if you will. Robert Nozick later articulates fundamentally the same idea in his book Anarchy, State, and Utopia. But that achievement is put in peril when others say, well, we'll just rearrange the rights so as to generate incompatible or conflicting rights, such that we have to override them to achieve justice. And again, I have an essay on John Rawls. This is a central problem, I think, in Rawls's claim to be a liberal, because he overrides rights in the name of justice. Now, the second theme that struck me as I was reading through these is the historical rootedness of abstractly formulated accounts of rights, and the importance of identifying a narrative of liberty for every cultural context. I've gotten into a little hot water with some conservatives because I say I do not defend Western values. I don't go around the world saying I'm here to promote Western values to you uneducated, non-civilized, non-Westerners. After all, Western culture, we could say, yes, it does have within it the ideas of rule of law, peace, justice, respect for rights, toleration, and so on. But Western history also contains within itself war, imperialism, genocide, murder, slavery, and systematic oppression. Those are also part of the Western history of civilization. My Chinese friends quickly point out to people who come and talk about Western values, yes, we've had a taste of that. Karl Marx from Germany imported his Western ideas, and we don't like it very much. So those are also Western ideas, if you will. The challenge is to find within every cultural context the indigenous roots of liberty, because every culture has a narrative of liberty and also a narrative of power and oppression as well, going in parallel, if you will. What we as advocates of liberty need to do is to excavate, dig down, identify in every cultural context those roots of liberty. Now, significantly, however, libertarian formulation of rights are always in abstract terms. We talk about every person, not every tall person or every person like me or every person of a certain gender or color or religion, but every person has rights. The American Declaration of Independence put it neatly. We hold these rights to be self-evident, that all men, and it's a quirk of English that they use men when it means human being. I don't think this is a gendered expression. All men are created equal. It doesn't say English people like us, but all human beings. And in that text in one context is applied later in other contexts. When Frederick Douglass gives his famous 4th of July speech, he says, this says all men. Does this not apply to me and other people like me who live under a condition of slavery? So those abstractly formulated rights are central to the libertarian tradition. But if they're to have staying power, they need to be rooted in a historical culture. The rights that the Americans articulated in 1776 reach back to Magna Carta in 1215, to the English Bill of Rights as well. They have a historical rootedness. You can find in Chinese culture the ideas of Lao Tzu and Mengzi or Mencius, similar ideas about the rule of law, limitations on power, and the rights of individuals. So the great challenge for libertarians in every culture is to find the roots of the narrative of liberty and connect them to our contemporary debates and discussion.
Tom G. Palmer is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. His new book is Realizing Freedom. You can get your copy at cato.org.